You people always have the same story.
Well, look what we found. A black man cruising through Brookstone Heights after midnight like he owns the place. Officer Travis Cole sneered as he violently ripped Malcolm Reed's driver's license from his hand and slapped it onto the rain-soaked hood. The card slid across the wet metal before dropping into a muddy puddle at Malcolm's feet. Cole shoved the flashlight directly into Malcolm's eyes, then grabbed the front of his jacket and yanked him forward. You people always have the same story. I'm just heading home. Funny how home always seems to be somewhere you don't belong. Without warning, he spun Malcolm around, slammed him hard against the SUV, and snapped steel handcuffs around his wrists. A second officer laughed from the patrol car, while Cole leaned close enough for Malcolm to feel his breath. That old SUV, those cheap clothes. And now this fake badge. You really thought a black guy could fool me into believing he's somebody important? Malcolm didn't resist. His voice remained calm. Officer, don't open the black case in the back. Cole burst into laughter. So that's where you're hiding your lies. He sliced the lock open with a rescue knife and flipped through the classified folder inside. His smile disappeared. The first page carried his badge number. The second contained photographs of him accepting cash during illegal traffic stops. By the third page, his hand was trembling. He grabbed his phone and whispered, "Uncle Warren?" I opened the folder. We have a serious problem. If you think this moment is unbelievable, stay with us until the very end. The truth hiding inside that folder will change everything. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and your local time in the comments. And if stories about justice, courage, and hidden truth inspire you, consider subscribing so you won't miss what happens next. Welcome back. The beauty of traveling is not only discovering new places, but discovering new parts of yourself. 6 hours earlier, Lake Briar looked nothing like the storm-soaked battlefield that would soon change the city's future. The evening sun cast long golden shadows across the quiet streets as Malcolm Reed steered his aging black SUV through the neighborhood where he had grown up. The paint had faded over the years. The driver's seat showed cracks from decades of use, and the engine carried the familiar rumble his father used to call the sound of honest work. Most people who saw the vehicle assumed its owner couldn't afford anything better. Malcolm had never bothered correcting them. He parked outside a modest brick house where the porch light was already glowing. Before he could knock, the front door opened. "You always arrive before I hear the engine," Malcolm said with a smile. His mother, Eleanor Reed, hugged him tightly. "A mother doesn't need to hear the engine," she whispered. She knows when her son is carrying something heavy. Inside dinner had already been prepared. Fried catfish, cornbread, collard greens, and sweet tea sat neatly on the old wooden table where the Reed family had shared thousands of meals before tragedy stole part of their happiness. For a while, neither of them spoke about work. They talked about neighbors, old memories, and the weather. Then Eleanor noticed the leather briefcase Malcolm had placed beside his chair. "You never bring work here." Malcolm glanced toward it before quietly answering, "Tonight is different." She looked into her son's eyes. "They're sending you back into that department, aren't they?" Malcolm nodded. "Tomorrow morning." Eleanor lowered her fork. "I buried one son because men with badges believed they could do anything they wanted." Silence filled the room. "I don't want to lose another." Malcolm reached across the table and gently held her hand. "I'm not going back to repeat history. I'm going back to end it." Those words carried a weight Eleanor had not heard before. She knew Malcolm had spent nearly 3 decades earning a reputation few investigators could match. Every promotion, every commendation, every sleepless night had led him toward tomorrow. But she also knew something no medal could erase. The last time a Reed man trusted the Lake Briar Police Department, Isaiah never came home. After dinner, Eleanor walked Malcolm to the front porch. She adjusted the collar of his gray jacket exactly as she had done when he was a teenager. "Whatever you're carrying in that case," she said softly, "make sure it doesn't become more important than coming home." Malcolm smiled. "I promise." He wished he could tell her the truth, that the leather case beside him contained 18 months of evidence collected through one of the largest internal corruption investigations in the state's history. That before sunrise, dozens of careers could collapse. That powerful men would do almost anything to stop that from happening. Instead, he kissed his mother's forehead, climbed into the SUV and drove into the gathering darkness. 20 minutes later, his secure phone vibrated. Rachel. Rachel Bennett's voice came through immediately. "We've got a problem." Malcolm's expression hardened. "What happened?" Someone tried accessing the Lantern files through the department's internal network. "Were they successful?" "No, but they know something exists." Rachel paused. "The digital backups are secure, but I don't trust the servers anymore." Malcolm tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "So we moved the physical file. Immediately. I'll deliver it myself." Rachel hesitated. "You shouldn't be alone. If they know a convoy is moving, they'll watch every official vehicle. The old SUV won't attract attention." "I hope you're right," Rachel answered quietly. "The case contains the final witness statements. Don't let anyone touch it." "They won't." When the call ended, Malcolm looked briefly at the black leather case resting on the passenger seat. Inside were photographs, financial records, body camera transcripts, witness interviews, patrol logs, enough evidence to dismantle an entire network hidden behind police uniforms. He had no idea fate was already steering someone else toward that same file. Across town, Officer Travis Cole leaned casually against his patrol cruiser outside a 24-hour gas station. A young black delivery driver stood beside his van, nervously clutching his wallet. "I swear I wasn't speeding." Cole slowly circled him. "No. You were just driving through the wrong neighborhood." The young man looked confused. "I deliver groceries." Cole shrugged. "Then maybe your paperwork isn't in order." He deliberately let the silence stretch. Finally, the frightened driver quietly asked, Is there any way to settle this without going downtown?" Cole smiled. "There it is." Minutes later, folded cash disappeared into Cole's pocket. No ticket, no report, no record. As the van pulled away, another patrol officer approached. Brad Henson grinned. "Easy money," Cole laughed. "Show people panic when they think they're about to lose everything." His radio crackled with routine traffic. Nothing unusual. Then headlights appeared at the far end of the road. An old black SUV rolled quietly through the intersection. Cole watched it disappear toward Brookstone Heights. He frowned. "That's strange." "What is, never seen that vehicle around here?" Brad looked once before shrugging. "It's probably somebody visiting." Cole's instincts worked differently. Or perhaps his prejudice did. A beat-up SUV, late at night, and a black guy behind the wheel. He climbed into his cruiser. "I'll check it out." Brad smirked. "Need backup." Cole started the engine. "I won't. Said, this won't take long." The patrol car eased onto the empty street, keeping several hundred feet behind Malcolm's SUV. Malcolm noticed the headlights in his rearview mirror almost immediately. He checked his speed. Exactly the limit. Turn signal, lane position. Everything perfect. Still, the cruiser remained behind him. He had investigated enough illegal traffic stops to recognize the feeling settling into his chest. Someone wasn't following the vehicle. They were following the man driving it. Malcolm took one slow breath, then another. He rested both hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. The leather case remained untouched beside him. Ahead, the road narrowed beneath towering oak trees. Behind him, red and blue lights suddenly exploded across the darkness. Malcolm looked into the mirror for one brief second, then calmly guided his father's old SUV onto the shoulder. The storm had finally arrived. Rain drummed against the roof of Malcolm Reed's old SUV as he slowly rolled down the driver's window. The flashing red and blue lights painted the empty highway in violent bursts of color, turning the quiet roadside into an intimidating stage. Malcolm kept both hands firmly on the steering wheel. He had spent nearly 30 years teaching young officers how professional traffic stops should be conducted. Tonight, he would become the man on the other side. Officer Travis Cole approached aggressively, one hand already resting on his holstered pistol. "Turn the engine off." Malcolm complied immediately. "Keys out. Toss them onto the dashboard." Again, Malcolm obeyed without hesitation. Cole leaned forward, sweeping his flashlight across Malcolm's face, as though searching for guilt instead of identity. "License. Registration." Malcolm slowly handed both documents over. Cole barely glanced at them. "So," he muttered, "you expect me to believe you're just driving home?" "I've committed no traffic violation, officer." Cole ignored the question. "What are you doing in Brookstone Heights?" "I'm traveling through the city." "That's not what I asked." Malcolm remained calm. "I'm traveling through Brookstone Heights." Cole's jaw tightened. "I hate smart answers." He stepped back, pretending to inspect the SUV before suddenly returning to the driver's window. "Step out." "May I ask the reason?" "Because I gave you an order." Malcolm looked directly at him. "Officer, if I've violated a law, I'd appreciate knowing which one." Cole smiled without humor. "Suspicious behavior." "What behavior, you?" The single word hung in the air heavier than the rain. Malcolm slowly opened the door and stepped onto the wet pavement. Cole immediately grabbed his arm. "Face the vehicle." Malcolm complied, hands spread against the cold metal. Rainwater streamed down the hood beneath his palms. Without warning, Cole shoved him forward. Hard. Malcolm's shoulder struck the SUV with a dull thud. "Keep your hands where I can see them." "I'm cooperating." "Not fast enough." The steel handcuffs clicked shut around Malcolm's wrists. Their cold weight settled against his skin. Across the highway, another patrol cruiser arrived. Officer Brad Henson climbed out, laughing. "What have we got?" Cole smirked. "Guy thinks he's important." Brad walked around Malcolm, openly studying him. "Doesn't look important." "Maybe he borrowed somebody else's ID." The two officers laughed together. Malcolm spoke quietly. "I would like both of your body cameras activated." Cole instinctively touched the small camera attached to his chest. "The battery died." Malcolm's eyes rested on the device. The indicator light had been deliberately covered with black electrical tape. I believe it's operational." Cole stepped closer until they were nearly face to face. "You don't tell me how to do my job." "No," Malcolm answered evenly. I simply asked that department policy be followed." Brad snorted. "Listen to him." "Maybe he went to law school." Cole reached into Malcolm's jacket and removed the identification wallet. He opened it. Inside was Malcolm's official law enforcement credential. Temporary executive appointment. Cole stared at it for several seconds, then laughed louder than before. "This has to be the worst fake I've ever seen." He tossed the credential into a puddle beside the road. Mud splashed across the gold lettering. Brad kicked it farther away with the toe of his boot. Malcolm never looked down. Instead, he calmly said, "Please call the verification number on the back." Cole closed the wallet. "I don't need to." You should. I said I don't. For the first time, Malcolm noticed something familiar. Cole's name, his badge number. He had seen both before. Not on a wanted poster. Not in an employee directory. Inside the classified file resting in the SUV. Malcolm understood immediately. This wasn't random. Fate had chosen exactly the wrong officer. Another pair of headlights appeared. A third patrol vehicle pulled onto the shoulder. A younger officer stepped out, Officer Evan Brooks. Unlike the others, Evan didn't smile. He looked at Malcolm, then at the unnecessary handcuffs. What happened? Cole answered before Malcolm could speak. Possible impersonation. Evan frowned. Did dispatch confirm that? I didn't ask dispatch. So, we're detaining him before verification. Cole shot him a sharp look. Is there a problem? Evan quickly shook his head. No, sir. Cole tossed Malcolm's keys toward Brad. Search the vehicle. Via. Malcolm finally spoke with a hint more urgency. There is no consent for a search. Cole shrugged. I don't need consent. You'll need legal justification. I'll write one later. Brad opened the driver's door. Nothing. He searched beneath the seats, the glove compartment, the rear floor. Then his eyes landed on the locked black leather case secured behind the passenger seat. Hey, I found something. Cole walked over slowly. The silver security seal reflected in the flashing lights. Restricted access. Authorized personnel only. Brad raised an eyebrow. What do you think? Cole grinned. Looks expensive. Malcolm's calm expression finally changed. Not fear, concern. Officer, do not open that case. Cole immediately noticed the difference. So this actually matters to you. It contains protected material. Even better. Malcolm took one careful breath. If you force it open, you're making a mistake you won't be able to undo. Brad chuckled. Sounds serious. Cole looked back toward Malcolm. You know what I hear? What? I hear a man who's finally nervous. Malcolm answered quietly. I'm trying to prevent you from destroying your own career. Cole burst into laughter. My career? He pulled a rescue knife from his duty belt. Watch this! The blade slid beneath the lock. Metal snapped. The security seal broke. Evan instinctively stepped forward. Officer Cole! I don't think we should... Cole silenced him with one look. Stay in your lane. He lifted the lid. Inside rested a thick black folder stamped in red. Confidential. Cole pulled it free. Rain dripped from the edges as he opened the first page. His confident smile disappeared. He blinked. Looked again. The photograph staring back at him showed himself accepting an envelope of cash beside his patrol cruiser 3 months earlier. The next page listed his badge number. The next contained dates, locations, witness statements, transaction records. Cole's breathing suddenly became uneven. Malcolm looked directly at him. I warned you. Cole flipped another page, his own signature, another photograph, another report. Then his trembling hand reached instinctively for his phone. Without taking his eyes off the folder, he whispered, Uncle Warren. I think we have a problem. Far away, hidden inside the reinforced spine of the damaged folder, a tiny indicator light blinked once, then went dark. The silent emergency transmission had already been sent. Neither Cole nor anyone else standing in the rain realized that the moment the folder was opened, The countdown to the collapse of Lake Briar's corrupt empire had already begun. Officer Travis Cole lowered the folder just enough to stare at Malcolm Reed. For the first time that night, arrogance disappeared from his face. "What? What is this?" Malcolm met his eyes without the slightest hint of panic. "The answer to every question you should have asked before putting those handcuffs on me." Cole's jaw tightened. Instead of closing the folder, he flipped through more pages. Photographs, financial records, body camera transcripts, patrol schedules. Every few pages, his own name appeared again. His breathing became heavier. No. This can't be real. Brad Henson stepped closer. "What are you looking at?" Cole immediately slammed the folder shut. "Nothing." Brad frowned. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Cole ignored him and quickly dialed the same private number. The line connected almost instantly. "Uncle Warren, I need you here. Right now." There was a brief silence. Then a calm voice answered, "Did you open the file?" "Yes." Another pause. "What exactly did you see?" Cole swallowed hard. "My name. My badge. Pictures." The voice on the other end suddenly lost all warmth. "Don't touch another page. I'm on my way." The call ended. Malcolm quietly observed every second of Cole's reaction. He knew exactly who had been on the other end. Deputy Chief Warren Pike, the central target of Operation Lantern. Nearly 15 minutes later, black headlights emerged through the rain. An unmarked government-issued SUV rolled onto the shoulder. The driver's door opened. Deputy Chief Warren Pike stepped into the storm wearing a dark overcoat instead of his uniform. His expression was calm, almost too calm. Cole hurried toward him. "Uncle." "Not here," Pike interrupted sharply. His eyes shifted toward Malcolm. For only a fraction of a second, something changed. Recognition. He knew exactly who Malcolm was. But just as quickly, the expression vanished. Pike walked slowly toward Malcolm as if they had never met. "So, who do we have here?" Cole answered confidently. "Possible police impersonator. Possession of restricted documents. And suspicious activity." Pike stopped directly in front of Malcolm. Rain rolled off the brim of his hat. "You claim you're law enforcement." Malcolm looked straight back. "I don't need to claim anything." Pike smiled faintly. "Interesting answer." Malcolm spoke in the same calm tone he had maintained all night. "You already know exactly who I am." Cole looked between the two men. "What?" Pike chuckled softly. "I've never seen this man before." Malcolm didn't blink. "Then why did you ask Officer Cole whether he opened the file before asking who I was?" Cole turned toward Pike. "You knew about the file." For one brief moment, the deputy chief realized he had made a mistake. His recovery came instantly. "I was asking because restricted documents shouldn't exist inside a civilian vehicle." Then he looked at Malcolm again. "You've stolen government property." Malcolm answered quietly. "Then verify my credentials." "The number is on the back of the identification your officer threw into the mud." Pike's smile disappeared. "We're past that." "No," Malcolm replied. You're trying very hard to make sure we never get to that." The rain intensified. No one spoke. Even Brad Henson sensed the tension changing. Finally, Pike stepped closer until only inches separated them. "I'm placing you under arrest for impersonating a police officer, for possession of confidential law enforcement material, and for interfering with an active investigation." Malcolm almost smiled. "An investigation?" I'd like to know which one. Pike's eyes narrowed. The one you're about to become part of. Cole looked relieved. So we take him downtown, Pike answered without hesitation. No. We don't use central booking. Malcolm immediately understood. That wasn't procedure. That was concealment. He calmly asked, "Why avoid the booking desk?" Pike's voice became colder. "Because I said so." He turned toward Brad. "Tow his SUV, inventory everything. The case comes with me." Malcolm spoke firmly. "That case is protected evidence." Pike looked at him without emotion. "It belongs to me now." As Brad prepared the tow truck paperwork, Malcolm noticed Officer Evan Brooks standing silently beside his cruiser. Unlike the others, Evan couldn't hide his discomfort. Their eyes met briefly. Malcolm said nothing, but he noticed something important. Evan kept glancing toward Cole's body camera, then toward Pike, then back to Malcolm. The young officer was thinking, questioning, watching. Hope often began that way. Cole removed Malcolm's phone from his pocket. "No more calls." "No problem," Malcolm answered. "My message has already been delivered." Cole frowned. "What message?" Malcolm simply remained silent. The answer irritated Cole more than any insult could have. Minutes later, Malcolm was placed in the rear seat of Pike's SUV instead of a marked patrol vehicle. No dispatch notification, no arrest number, no booking authorization. Everything about the arrest was being hidden. As the convoy entered the underground garage beneath the Lake Briar Police Department, Malcolm quietly counted the security cameras. Several had been disconnected. Others pointed toward empty walls. Operation Lantern had suggested widespread corruption. What he was seeing confirmed it. Inside the station, officers stopped talking as Malcolm walked through the hallway in handcuffs. Some stared with curiosity. Others quickly looked away. An elderly civilian records clerk froze the instant she saw Malcolm's face. Recognition flashed across her eyes. Before she could speak, Pike's cold voice echoed across the hallway. "Eyes back on your work." The woman lowered her head immediately. Fear ruled this building long before Malcolm had walked through its doors. He was escorted into a narrow interrogation room. No recording equipment, no visible camera, no interview monitor, only a steel table bolted to the floor. Cole tossed a blank incident report onto the table. "I'm writing that you resisted arrest." "I never resisted." Cole continued writing. "You reached toward my weapon." "I never touched your weapon." Another sentence appeared. "You attempted to flee." Malcolm looked directly at him. "So this is how your reports are written." Cole never answered. Outside the room, Pike spoke quietly with Brad. "We move before sunrise. No mistakes, no witnesses." Those words reached Malcolm through the thin metal door. He leaned back in his chair. The storm outside was only beginning. Inside this building, another storm. One hidden for more than 20 years was finally about to break. The heavy steel door closed with a deafening clang. For several long seconds, Malcolm Reed sat alone in the interrogation room, listening to the rain beating against the station windows. The silence reminded him of another night. 20 years earlier, another interrogation room, another Reed, another lie. His younger brother, Isaiah Reed, had left home that evening to deliver construction blueprints to a client across town. He had promised their mother he would be back before dinner. He never returned. The official report claimed Isaiah ignored police commands, resisted arrest, and reached toward the center console of his truck. The department ruled the shooting justified within 48 hours. No jury, no public hearing, no questions. Only a neatly typed report signed by supervisors who insisted every officer had followed policy. But Malcolm had never believed it. Isaiah had been cautious to a fault. As children, their father had taught them one lesson whenever flashing lights appeared behind the family car. Hands where they can see them. Speak slowly. Never argue. Isaiah knew those rules by heart, yet he still died. That night changed Malcolm forever. He left Lake Briar carrying more questions than answers, promising himself that one day he would uncover the truth hidden inside those reports. Now 20 years later, he was sitting in the same building. Only this time, the truth was closer than ever. The interrogation room door opened. Officer Evan Brooks stepped inside carrying a paper cup of water. His face still showed the bruise beginning to form beneath one eye, where Travis Cole had shoved him earlier. Neither man spoke until the door closed again. Evan quietly placed the cup on the table. "I'm not supposed to talk to you." Malcolm offered a faint smile. "Yet you're here." Evan looked toward the security window. "There aren't any cameras in this room." "I noticed. They said they're broken." Malcolm shook his head gently. "They're not broken. They were disconnected." Evan's expression changed. "You figured that out already. I've spent most of my career investigating scenes exactly like this." For several moments, Evan remained silent. Finally, he asked the question that had been haunting him. "Who are you?" Malcolm leaned back. "The better question is, who do you think I am?" Evan exhaled slowly. "I know you're not a fake." I saw Officer Cole's face after he opened that folder. He looked terrified. Malcolm didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, "Why did you become a police officer?" The question caught Evan off guard. "My father." "What about him?" Evan stared at the floor. He owned a small trucking company. One night, officers seized his truck during what they called an investigation. They never returned it. He lost his business, our house, everything. My dad spent years trying to prove the seizure was illegal. No one listened. He died believing the system had already decided his life didn't matter. Malcolm's eyes softened. What was his name? Daniel Brooks. For the first time that night, Malcolm nodded with certainty. "I know that name." Evan looked up instantly. "What?" "Your father isn't forgotten. He appears in the investigation file." Evan's breathing stopped for a moment. "That's impossible. I've searched every archive." "There was nothing." "Exactly," Malcolm replied quietly. When someone made sure there was nothing, the young officer felt his pulse racing. Everything he had believed about the department suddenly seemed fragile. Before he could ask another question, loud voices echoed from the hallway. Deputy Chief Warren Pike, Travis Cole, Brad Henson. They weren't trying to hide the argument. Cole's voice carried through the thin walls. "What if that folder copied everything?" Pike answered sharply. "Then we destroy whatever's left. And the man? I'll handle him." Evan slowly looked toward Malcolm. "They're talking about you." "They're talking about evidence," Malcolm corrected. "And men who fear evidence often become desperate." Outside, Pike walked into the evidence control office. "Done delete every traffic camera recording from Highway 8 between 11 and midnight." The technician hesitated. "Sir, those files automatically back up." "Then overwrite the backups." "No questions." Across the room, Brad Henson sat at a computer rewriting the arrest report. Failure to obey commands. Aggressive behavior. Attempting to reach an officer's firearm. Each sentence drifted farther from reality. Cole paced nervously. I shouldn't have opened that folder. No, Pike replied coldly. You shouldn't have panicked. Cole lowered his voice. What if somebody already knows? Pike stared directly at him. Then we make sure nobody believes them. Back inside the interrogation room, Malcolm could almost predict every move they would make. False reports, missing recordings, manufactured evidence. It was the same pattern that had appeared in dozens of unresolved complaints over the past 18 months. The same pattern that had surrounded Isaiah's death. Evan leaned closer. If they're willing to change reports, what else have they done? Malcolm answered without hesitation, enough to fear one folder more than the law itself. Evan's hands trembled. I don't know who I can trust. You start, Malcolm said quietly, by trusting what you saw with your own eyes. The young officer remained silent. Those words settled deep inside him. He hadn't seen a dangerous criminal. He had seen a calm man obey every instruction, while other officers violated every rule they claimed to enforce. The door suddenly burst open. Travis Cole stormed inside, his eyes immediately locked onto Evan. What are you doing? I was bringing him water. For 20 minutes, Cole grabbed Evan by the front of his uniform and slammed him backward against the wall. I told you to guard him, not make friends. Evan tried to answer. I wasn't. Cole shoved him again. Harder. The paper cup crashed onto the floor water, spreading beneath Malcolm's chair. Cole pointed a finger inches from Evan's face. You'd better decide which side you're on, because before this night is over, anybody standing next to him becomes my enemy. Malcolm watched silently. He had seen fear before. He had seen corruption before, but what he saw in Evan Brooks at that moment was something far more powerful. A good man reaching the point where staying silent was no longer possible. The interrogation room fell silent after Travis Cole stormed out, leaving Evan Brooks leaning against the wall, breathing heavily. The bruise beneath his eye had darkened. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Finally, Malcolm broke the silence. He's afraid. Evan frowned. Officer Cole. Malcolm nodded. People who believe they're untouchable don't lose control like that. They only panic when they realize the truth can finally reach them. Outside the room, Cole paced back and forth through the hallway. His hands would not stop shaking. I want to see that folder again. Deputy Chief Warren Pike looked at him without emotion. You've already seen too much. What if there are more copies? There are always copies. Cole swallowed hard. What if the FBI already has everything? Pike's voice became dangerously calm. If they did, they wouldn't be waiting. They'd already be here. The answer offered little comfort. Cole remembered every photograph inside that folder, every illegal stop, every envelope of cash, every report he had signed without reading. For years, he believed no one would ever connect the pieces. Now they had. Across the hall, Brad Henson entered carrying the damaged black case. The lock's broken. Pike reached for the folder. No, not the folder. The spine. Brad looked confused. The spine. Open it. Brad carefully examined the thick, reinforced binding before slicing through the leather with a utility knife. A tiny metal compartment became visible. What the? Inside sat a circuit board no larger than a thumb. Its indicator light was dark. Cole stared in disbelief. What is that? Malcolm answered from inside the interrogation room before anyone else could. A silent evidence transmitter. Every face turned toward the closed steel door. Cole's heartbeat pounded in his ears. Pike slowly picked up the tiny device. It's already dead. Malcolm's calm voice carried through the room, because it already finished its job. No one spoke. Pike suddenly understood. The transmission had already been completed. Everything recorded after the folder was opened, then every fingerprint, every voice, every location, gone. Sent somewhere they could no longer reach. Cole stumbled backward. "We're finished!" Pike grabbed him violently by the collar. "No. We adapt." His eyes hardened. "We remove the source." Cole immediately understood what Pike meant. "The prisoner." Pike released him. "Not here. This building has too many witnesses." Brad lowered his voice. "So where?" "The warehouse." Cole looked uneasy. "What about processing?" "There won't be processing." "And what about dispatch?" "There won't be dispatch." Every word made the conspiracy larger. Inside the interrogation room, Malcolm had heard enough. Operation Lantern had predicted Pike would eventually abandon procedure. Now it was happening, exactly as expected. Evan leaned closer. "They're moving you." "I know. They'll kill you." Malcolm looked at the young officer. "Only if everyone stays silent." Evan stared at the floor. "My father spent years believing someone inside this department would eventually do the right thing. No one ever did." Malcolm's voice remained steady. "Tonight, someone still can." Those words settled heavily inside Evan. For years, he had told himself he was different from the officers who abused their authority. Yet every time he stayed quiet. Was he really different outside another figure quietly entered the station? Captain Laura Hayes. She carried a thick personnel binder beneath one arm and greeted several officers as though nothing unusual had happened. Only her eyes betrayed urgency. She walked directly toward Pike. "You asked for the disciplinary files." Pike accepted the binder without looking up. "Leave them." Laura noticed the damaged folder on the desk, its broken spine, the exposed electronics. Her heart skipped. The transmitter had been activated. She immediately understood Malcolm had succeeded. Without changing her expression, she stepped into the hallway and casually removed her phone. One short, encrypted message. "Package opened. Location confirmed." The message disappeared seconds after sending. Hundreds of miles away, a secure federal server acknowledged receipt. Rachel Bennett looked up from her monitor. A flashing notification appeared. Lantern node activated. She immediately opened the incoming data. GPS coordinates, voice recordings, timestamps, officer identification, transmission complete. Rachel stood so quickly her chair rolled backward. "We found him." Federal agents around the room looked up simultaneously. "Where?" Rachel grabbed her jacket. "Lake Briar Police Department." "We move now." Back inside the station, Pike's instinct suddenly sharpened. He looked toward Laura. "What were you doing with your phone?" She answered without hesitation. "Checking on my son." Pike stepped closer. "Show me." Laura handed over the device. The message had already erased itself. Pike searched through every screen. Nothing. He handed it back, but suspicion remained in his eyes. Minutes later, every officer in the hallway received a direct order. All personal phones. On my desk. No exceptions. One by one, devices were surrendered. Laura placed hers with the others. Calm. Controlled, invisible. Pike watched every movement. Someone inside the department had betrayed him. He just didn't know who. Meanwhile, Brad unlocked the rear entrance of the station. where two unmarked SUVs waited with their engines running. No prisoner transport paperwork, no custody transfer forms, no radio notification. Everything about the operation existed outside official procedure. Cole looked toward the interrogation room. "What, you really think he'll come quietly?" Pike answered coldly. "He doesn't have a choice." Inside, Malcolm stood as the cell door opened. He noticed the plastic restraints in Brad's hands instead of standard transport cuffs. Another violation. Another mistake. As Brad secured Malcolm's wrists, Evan quietly stepped beside him under the pretense of checking the restraints. For less than a second, he slipped a tiny metal paperclip into Malcolm's palm. Their eyes met. No words were exchanged. None were needed. Malcolm closed his fingers around the paperclip. A faint smile almost appeared. The young officer had finally chosen a side. Outside, thunder shook the night sky as the convoy prepared to leave the station. Neither Pike nor Cole realized that while they believed they were transporting a prisoner, federal agents were already racing toward Lake Briar, and every mile they drove would bring them closer to the moment their entire empire collapsed. The two unmarked SUVs disappeared into the darkness, leaving the lights of Lake Briar Police Department far behind. Rain continued to pound against the windshield. Malcolm Reed sat silently in the rear seat, his wrists bound with plastic restraints instead of standard transport cuffs. Hidden inside his right palm was the tiny paperclip Evan Brooks had slipped to him. Across from him, Travis Cole stared through the window without saying a word. For the first time since the traffic stop, he looked less like a police officer and more like a frightened man. Deputy Chief Warren Pike finally broke the silence. "You've been chasing ghosts for 18 months. Malcolm calmly replied, "No. I've been chasing names. And tonight, every one of them is finally attached to a face." Pike smiled. "You still think you're walking out of this alive?" "I think you're asking yourself that question." No one spoke again. 20 minutes later, the convoy turned through the rusted gates of an abandoned municipal storage yard on the outskirts of town. Years ago, it had served as an impound lot. Now it was deserted. Or so it appeared. Inside the largest warehouse, rows of forgotten vehicles sat beneath layers of dust and plastic sheeting. Some still carried faded evidence stickers. Others had no identification at all. The moment Malcolm stepped inside, he stopped walking, his eyes fixed on an old white pickup truck parked against the far wall. The company logo was almost invisible beneath the dust. Brooks Freight Services. Evan froze beside him, his breathing caught. "My father's truck." He slowly approached it, touching the cracked driver's door with trembling fingers. "They told us it had been auctioned years ago." Malcolm looked toward Pike. "You never returned it." Pike shrugged. "Property has a way of disappearing when paperwork disappears." Evan turned toward him, disbelief giving way to anger. "You destroyed my family." Pike didn't even blink. "Your father destroyed himself. He couldn't pay his debts." "That's not what happened," Evan shouted. "My dad lost everything after your officers took this truck." Pike's face hardened. "Watch your tone." Before Evan could answer, Malcolm quietly asked, "What about Isaiah Reed?" The warehouse fell silent. For the first time that night, Pike hesitated. Only for a second. Then he walked toward the back of the warehouse and stopped beside another vehicle hidden beneath a gray tarp. He pulled the cover away. A badly burned pickup emerged from beneath years of dust. Malcolm felt the air leave his lungs, the dent above the left rear wheel, the cracked side mirror. Even after 2 decades, he recognized it instantly. Isaiah's truck, his brother's truck. "You said it was destroyed," Malcolm whispered. Pike folded his arms. "We lied." Malcolm stepped closer. Rainwater still stained the rusted metal where the roof had collapsed. This should have been released to the family. Pike looked directly at him. It couldn't be. There was too much inside. Malcolm's jaw tightened. "What did you plant?" Pike answered with chilling indifference. "Whatever we needed." The words echoed through the warehouse. Cole slowly turned toward Pike. "What are you talking about?" Pike sighed. "You really want the full story now?" Cole didn't answer. Pike continued anyway. 20 years ago, Isaiah Reed refused to pay. He kept asking questions. He wanted badge numbers. He wanted names. He thought complaints actually mattered. Malcolm's fists clenched. "So you murdered him." Pike's expression never changed. It wasn't supposed to end that way. But once a gun is fired, you either bury one man or you bury the truth. Those words struck Cole harder than anything he had seen in the folder. "You told me. Oh, you told me every shooting was justified." Pike looked at his nephew with open disappointment. "I told you what was necessary. You never asked enough questions." Cole staggered backward. His entire career suddenly looked different. Every shortcut, every false report, every illegal stop, every order. He had always believed they were protecting the department. Now he realized they had only been protecting Warren Pike. Malcolm spoke quietly. "He's going to do the same thing to you." Cole looked confused. "What? The moment you're no longer useful. How you're just another loose end." Pike slowly smiled. "I was wondering how long it would take you to say that." Brad Henson suddenly entered carrying a red gasoline container. Cole stared at it. "What is that for?" Pike answered without hesitation. "The cleanup." Brad began pouring gasoline across Malcolm's old SUV, which had already been towed into the warehouse. The liquid spread beneath the tires, then across several cardboard evidence boxes. Cole's eyes widened. "You're burning everything. I'm removing the problem." Malcolm calmly looked at Cole. "When investigators arrive, who do you think they'll blame?" Cole's breathing became uneven. "They'll say I opened the folder. They'll say I made the stop. They'll say." His voice faded. Pike stepped closer. "Exactly. You finally figured it out. You were always the backup plan." Cole slowly reached for his sidearm. "Uncle." Pike's smile vanished. "I'm not your uncle tonight. I'm your commanding officer. Lower your hand." Cole hesitated. For the first time in years, he refused to obey immediately. Malcolm seized the moment. "Travis, there's still one decision nobody can make except you." Cole looked toward Malcolm. "What?" "You can keep protecting the man who destroyed your conscience. You'll help stop him before he destroys what's left of yours." The warehouse became deathly quiet. Brad stopped pouring gasoline. Even Evan held his breath. For one long moment, it seemed Travis Cole might finally choose the truth. Then Warren Pike slowly drew his own pistol. His cold eyes never left his nephew. No loose ends. The sound of the gunshot exploded through the warehouse. Cole cried out and collapsed onto the concrete, clutching his shoulder as blood spread across his uniform. Chaos erupted. Brad instinctively raised his weapon. Evan lunged toward Malcolm. Outside, far beyond the warehouse walls, the distant wail of multiple sirens pierced the storm. Someone was coming, and they were coming fast. The gunshot echoed through the abandoned warehouse like thunder trapped beneath a steel roof. Travis Cole collapsed onto the concrete, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "You shot me," he gasped, staring at Warren Pike with complete disbelief. Pike didn't even look remorseful. "I warned you. No loose ends," before Brad Henson could react. Evan Brooks lunged forward, knocking Brad's pistol toward the floor. The weapon skidded across the concrete as the two officers crashed into a stack of rusted evidence shelves. "Run," Evan shouted. Malcolm didn't run. Instead, he used the tiny paperclip hidden in his hand to work at the plastic restraint around his wrists. The lock finally snapped open. Pike noticed. "There!" "Stop him!" Brad broke free from Evan and reached for Malcolm, but Malcolm sidestepped calmly. Years of defensive tactics training took over. Brad's momentum carried him straight into a steel support beam. His pistol flew from his hand. Malcolm kicked it beneath an abandoned patrol car. Outside, the growing sound of sirens became impossible to ignore. Not one patrol car, several, then many more. Pike looked toward the warehouse entrance. His confidence flickered for the first time. Who called them? No one answered. Evan slowly stood, breathing hard. You should have worried less about destroying evidence, and more about the people you thought were too afraid to speak. Pike's eyes narrowed. You. Before he could raise his weapon, Malcolm stepped between them. "You've hurt enough families." Pike sneered. "You still think this ends with an arrest?" "It ends with the truth." Pike laughed bitterly. "The truth? The public doesn't care about truth. They believe uniforms. They believe reports. They believe people like me." Malcolm's voice remained steady. "They believed you. Until tonight." The warehouse doors suddenly shook. A powerful voice boomed through loudspeakers outside. "Deputy Chief Warren Pike! This is the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Georgia Attorney General's office. The building is surrounded. Drop your weapons and come out with your hands visible." Brad's face turned white. "They found us." Pike slowly backed toward the rear exit. "No. They're bluffing." Another voice followed immediately. "Warren Pike. We have live GPS data audio recordings and evidence transmitted directly from the classified case you unlawfully opened. There is no escape." Cole looked up from the floor, his face pale from blood loss. "He told us. He said the transmitter had already finished its job." Pike glared at Malcolm. "You planned this." Malcolm shook his head. "No. You planned it. The moment you chose corruption over duty." Outside, powerful floodlights illuminated every window of the warehouse. Red laser sights danced across the cracked walls. The entire building was surrounded. Then another familiar voice echoed through the loudspeaker. "Warren!" It was Rachel Bennett. "You've spent 18 months hiding behind false reports. Tonight those reports won't protect you." Pike's breathing became heavier. He looked toward the rear loading door. Still possible. Still one way out. Without warning, he sprinted toward it. Malcolm reacted instantly. "Pike!" The deputy chief slammed open the rear exit. Instead of freedom, dozens of armed federal agents were already waiting. Federal agents don't move. Pike fired one desperate shot into the darkness. The response was immediate. "Weapon down. Now!" Within seconds, laser sights covered his chest from every direction. Pike slowly realized the truth. There had never been an escape. He lowered his pistol. Inside the warehouse, medics rushed toward Travis Cole. As they treated his shoulder, Cole grabbed Malcolm's sleeve. I need to tell them everything. Malcolm looked down at him. You finally understand. Cole closed his eyes. My first illegal stop. I was 24. I thought it was only one report. Then another, and another. Pike kept saying, "Protect the department." Tears mixed with the rainwater on Cole's face. I wasn't protecting anything. I became exactly what I promised I'd never become. Malcolm said quietly, "Tell the truth. It's the only thing that can still help the families you hurt." Cole nodded weakly. I will. Across the warehouse, Captain Laura Hayes hurried inside alongside Rachel Bennett and several federal agents. Rachel immediately searched the room until her eyes found Malcolm. For the first time that night, the tension in her face disappeared. You made it! Malcolm gave a tired smile. Barely. Rachel held up a secure tablet displaying the completed transmission log. The folder worked. Every second after it was opened was transmitted. She turned the screen so Pike could see it as agents escorted him back inside in handcuffs. The display showed timestamps, audio recordings, GPS coordinates, fingerprint confirmations, every command Pike had given, every lie, every threat, every crime committed after the traffic stop. Pike stared silently at the screen. Months of carefully hidden corruption had collapsed because one officer believed he could open a folder without consequences. Rachel looked directly at him. You didn't lose tonight because someone betrayed you. You lost because you believed power was stronger than evidence. As federal agents escorted Pike toward an armored vehicle, television news helicopters appeared overhead. Their searchlights flooded the warehouse yard. Reporters had begun arriving. The story was no longer hidden inside an abandoned building. By sunrise, the entire state would know. But Malcolm understood one final battle still remained. Winning the arrests was only the beginning. The whole city still believed the false story Pike had already released. To restore every victim's name, including Isaiah's, the complete truth would have to be revealed where no one could deny it. And that moment was waiting only a few hours away. By sunrise, every major news station in Georgia had interrupted its regular programming. The headline flashed across television screens. Deputy Police Chief detained after secret federal operation. Outside Lake Briar City Hall, satellite trucks lined the streets. Reporters crowded the entrance while residents gathered behind police barricades, desperate to understand how a routine traffic stop had exploded into the largest corruption investigation the city had ever witnessed. Inside the emergency hearing room, cameras pointed toward a long table where city officials, prosecutors, and law enforcement leaders waited in tense silence. Warren Pike sat at the center wearing handcuffs. For the first time in decades, the man who had controlled everyone else had no control over the room. Across from him stood Malcolm Reed. His wrists were no longer restrained. His gray jacket was still stained with rain and dust from the warehouse. Yet he stood with the quiet confidence that had never left him. The room fell silent as Rachel Bennett approached the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, she began. Before this hearing continues, the state of Georgia wishes to correct a false public narrative that was deliberately created during the past 12 hours. She looked toward Malcolm. Chief Reed, you may step forward. Whispers spread through the room. Chief, the mayor frowned. What did she just say? Rachel unfolded and bearing the governor's seal. Effective yesterday at 6:00 p.m. Malcolm Elijah Reed was legally appointed the new chief of police for the city of Lake Briar. The chamber erupted. Television cameras immediately turned toward Malcolm. Several city council members exchanged stunned looks. One reporter whispered, "The man they arrested last night." was already the chief. Rachel nodded. Yes. But that is not the most important truth. She paused long enough for every camera to focus. For the past 18 months, Chief Reed has also served as the operational commander of a confidential, multi-agency anti-corruption investigation known as Operation Lantern. A giant screen descended behind the podium. Rachel pressed a button. The first video appeared. Officer Travis Cole forcing Malcolm against the SUV. Another clip followed. Cole throwing Malcolm's identification into the mud. Then another. Cole breaking open the classified case. The room became completely silent. Every word spoken beside the highway echoed through the speakers. Uncle Warren. I opened the folder. Moments later came Pike's own recorded voice. Don't take him to central booking. Destroy what's left. No witnesses. Each sentence landed like another blow against the former deputy chief. The mayor slowly removed his glasses. My God, Rachel continued. The recording you're watching was transmitted automatically from the evidence protection device hidden inside the classified file. She displayed the electronic log, timestamps, GPS coordinates, voice authentication, fingerprint verification. Every second matched perfectly. There was nowhere left to hide. Warren Pike finally stood. Those recordings proved nothing. They were manipulated. Rachel calmly replied, Then perhaps you'd like to explain your fingerprints inside a sealed federal evidence package. Pike remained silent. She clicked again. Financial records appeared. Offshore transfers, property seizures, evidence inventories, names of more than 40 citizens whose vehicles had disappeared after unlawful traffic stops. Then came another photograph. An old white freight truck. Daniel Brooks' truck. Evan Brooks stood from the audience. My father died trying to get that truck back. His voice trembled. You told us it had been sold. Rachel answered. It was hidden inside Deputy Chief Pike's private warehouse for 19 years. Gasps filled the room. Then Malcolm slowly walked toward the center of the chamber carrying a small evidence bag. Inside rested a battered silver wristwatch. He held it carefully. My brother wore this every day. Several reporters leaned forward. Rachel nodded toward him. You may continue. Malcolm took one slow breath. The official report claimed this watch was returned to my family after Isaiah Reed's death. He looked directly at Pike. It never was. Rachel opened another file. Forensic inventory confirms this watch remained inside Lake Briar Police evidence storage continuously for 20 years. The room became eerily quiet. Malcolm's voice remained steady despite the emotion in his eyes. My brother didn't die because he broke the law. He died because he refused to surrender his dignity. Another video appeared, not body camera footage, an archived dispatch recording recovered during Operation Lantern. Isaiah's voice could be heard clearly. I'm complying. My hands are visible. Please don't. The recording ended with a gunshot. No one spoke. Even the reporters lowered their cameras. For 20 years, one family had been forced to live beneath a lie. Now the lie had finally collapsed. Rachel turned toward Travis Cole, who had arrived in a wheelchair with his wounded shoulder heavily bandaged. Officer Cole. Do you wish to make a statement? Cole nodded slowly. His voice shook. Sorry, I spent years believing loyalty meant protecting my superiors. It didn't. It meant helping them destroy innocent people. He looked toward Malcolm. You warned me not to open that folder. I laughed. I thought the badge on my chest made me untouchable. He lowered his head. I was wrong. I accept responsibility for every report I falsified. I'll testify against everyone involved." A silence followed. Then federal agents stepped beside Warren Pike. Rachel looked at him one final time. "Warren Pike, based on the evidence presented today, you are formally charged with conspiracy obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, civil rights violations, organized extortion, and offenses connected to the unlawful death of Isaiah Reed." The agents secured Pike's handcuffs. For the first time in his career, he looked genuinely afraid. As he was escorted toward the exit, he turned once more toward Malcolm. "This city will never forgive you," Malcolm answered without raising his voice. "I didn't come here to be forgiven. I came here so the truth never has to ask permission again." The courtroom remained silent as the doors closed behind Warren Pike. Justice had finally spoken. But for Malcolm Reed, the most meaningful moment wasn't watching a corrupt man walk away in handcuffs. It was seeing his mother's tears. Not tears of grief this time, but tears of peace after 20 long years of waiting for someone to finally believe the truth. 3 months later, Lake Briar looked like a different city. The courthouse steps that had once been crowded with reporters, chasing rumors, were now filled with families waiting for justice. Inside courtroom 3, Warren Pike stood before a federal judge wearing a plain orange jail uniform instead of the decorated police dress blues he had worn for decades. There were no cameras allowed inside, no applause, only silence. One by one, the charges were read aloud. Conspiracy to violate civil rights, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, extortion under color of law, fraud, multiple counts related to unlawful seizures. And finally, conspiracy connected to the wrongful death of Isaiah Reed. Pike lowered his head. For the first time in 20 years, no report could protect him. No badge could shield him. No loyal officer remained to rewrite the truth. Across the courtroom, Travis Cole waited for his turn to testify. His shoulder had healed, but the weight he carried was far heavier than the bullet wound. He stood before the judge and spoke for nearly 4 hours. He admitted how illegal traffic stops became routine, how innocent drivers were chosen because they looked vulnerable, how evidence disappeared, how reports were rewritten before supervisors ever saw them, and how every officer involved believed the system would protect them forever. When Cole finished, he slowly turned toward Malcolm. "I can't undo what I helped destroy. But every name I remember, I'll give investigators every single one." Malcolm gave a quiet nod. That's where accountability begins. Outside the courthouse, another line of citizens waited. Some carried faded photographs. Others held folders filled with unanswered complaints dating back years. For the first time, investigators accepted every file. No one was turned away. Over the following weeks, dozens of families recovered vehicles that had vanished into Pike's hidden warehouse. Others received financial compensation after property seizures were declared illegal. Some families finally received official apologies. No amount of money erased years of pain. But recognition mattered. Truth mattered. Justice mattered. One afternoon, Evan Brooks drove an old white freight truck through downtown Lake Briar. The engine rattled loudly. The paint remained faded. But the truck belonged to his family again. He parked outside the police headquarters where Malcolm was waiting. "I thought about restoring it," Evan admitted. Malcolm smiled. "Will you?" Evan looked at the weathered logo on the driver's door. "No, I want people to see exactly what nearly disappeared." Malcolm nodded. "Some scars deserve to remain visible." Weeks later, Captain Laura Hayes officially accepted responsibility for leading the department's new Office of Professional Integrity. Every patrol officer would now receive mandatory ethics training. Every traffic stop would be automatically uploaded to independent servers. Body cameras could no longer be manually disabled. Evidence rooms would be monitored by civilian auditors instead of internal supervisors alone. Anonymous complaints would be reviewed by an independent oversight board. The old culture had depended on silence. The new one would depend on transparency. On a bright Monday morning, Malcolm Reed finally took the oath he had been unable to complete months earlier. The council chamber was filled with officers, firefighters, teachers, veterans, business owners, and ordinary residents. No dramatic music played. No celebration overshadowed the moment. The room simply stood as Malcolm placed his hand upon the Constitution. After taking the oath, he approached the podium. He looked across the audience before speaking. "I don't accept this badge because I believe police officers are better than the people they serve. I accept it because every badge should remind its owner that no one stands above the law." He paused. For too many years, trust was replaced by fear. Respect was replaced by intimidation. And truth was buried beneath paperwork. That ends today. The audience rose in quiet applause, not because they believed every problem had disappeared, but because, for the first time in years, hope no longer sounded impossible. Later that afternoon, Malcolm drove alone through Brookstone Heights. He was still behind the wheel of the same old black SUV. The cracked leather seats remained. The faded paint remained. Nothing about the vehicle had changed. As he approached the stretch of road where Travis Cole had stopped him months earlier, he noticed a young patrol officer parked behind a disabled sedan. The officer wasn't writing a ticket. He wasn't shouting. He was helping an elderly woman replace a flat tire. When the work was finished, he wished her a safe drive and returned to his cruiser. Malcolm watched quietly before continuing down the road. A small smile crossed his face. Real reform wasn't measured by speeches. It was measured by ordinary moments when someone with authority chose kindness over power. That evening, Malcolm visited Greenwood Memorial Cemetery. His mother Eleanor was already waiting beside Isaiah's grave. Without speaking, Malcolm removed a small evidence bag from his coat. Inside rested Isaiah's repaired silver wristwatch, the same watch hidden inside the evidence room for 20 long years. He carefully placed it on the polished headstone. Eleanor reached for her son's hand. He finally came home. Malcolm looked at the sunset spreading across the cemetery. No. The truth did. And it brought him with it. Neither of them spoke again. They didn't need to. Some victories were too profound for words. As Malcolm walked back toward his old SUV, he glanced once more at the city stretching across the horizon. Lake Briar would never erase what had happened. Neither would he. But every officer who wore the badge after this day would know one lesson that no training manual could ever teach. Power is temporary. Character is permanent. And sooner or later, the truth always finds the courage to speak.
True justice is never built on revenge. It is built on courage, honesty, and the willingness to stand for what is right, even when standing alone feels impossible. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us why integrity will always outlast corruption.